One of the big subjects in life is government. It's very, very difficult in humanity to have good government. Bad government is the norm. It is not the exception. What is the difference between good government and bad government? What are the tenets? What are the principles of good government? We don't have any literature. We don't have any principles of the difference between good government and bad government. A good government suffers the sufferings of its people. It feels the sufferings of its people. It walks in the shoes of the people and tries to resolve that suffering. We hardly have any such government. Governments are usually the very rich. Why is it that the rich control the governments almost everywhere on the planet? Because it takes money to run for government. You could have democracy, but to be known, right, takes a lot of money. People spend 50 million, $100 million in electoral campaigns. Now, where does this money come from? If it takes $100 million for an individual to be recognized and known with posters and ads and radio ads, TV ads and publicity and Facebook and people working for the candidate, where it usually comes from corporations. It doesn't come from the ordinary person. And that's why government is usually, when it's elected, it is in submission to these corporations who helped it get in power and does not really give a damn about the people. What is the use of going to a ballot box in order to vote for 4 candidates who don't feel the suffering of the people? Democracy means the rule of the people. If 95% of the people are poor or middle class poor, which is middle class is another kind of poverty, it's like middle poverty, because the middle class also suffers from strangulation of bills. They're not comfortable. They're only about 5% or less of humans are wealthy and don't have to worry about money. Most people, including the middle class, worry about money. They worry about their retirement. They worry about their mortgage. They worry about their rent. They worry about their food. They worry about the cost of the internet, the television, the iPhones, the children, and so forth. So it takes a government that feels this kind of struggle, which 95% of the people feel. And these 95% of the people actually pay the government. The government is not free. The people, mostly poor and middle class, pay for the government, but they don't get any service back. The government is surrounded by the crocodiles of corporations who want favors in return for helping that government get into power. So what is a bad government? A bad government is simply a fake profiteer. I mean, it profits from the people. It takes money in, all the taxes come in, and it's not sufficient. It even goes into serious debt. The United States government is $22 trillion in debt. Now, if any individual were at that level of debt, they couldn't get a cup of coffee. But the United States government is working like it is the most powerful country in the world. A bad government is good in speeches. There's a lot of speaking going on. There's a lot of press conferences going on, but there's no action. There's no action to relieve the sufferings and the struggles of the people. That's the kind of government we have. We were surrendered to this kind of. We've had this government for ages. A bad government is not concerned about the survival of the people or the prosperity of the people, which is step one. You got to survive first. Step two, you can prosper and thrive and realize your dreams. It takes money to realize your dreams. If you want to be an artist, if you want to travel, if you want to experience different things, you need money to do that. If you're stuck to the rent, you're stuck to the mortgage and stuck to the food, you're not going to realize a lot of your dreams. Therefore, money is very important. And government has to take money very seriously and make its people prosperous. Well, there's not going to be any prosperity if survival is the killer of most societies. A fake government, a bad government, will sell nationalism and racism, pride in the country, pride in the race. And when you do that, you have nothing to do. You don't have to look into the survival of the people. Once the people buy into the nationalism and racism and feel good about being proud of the country and proud of the race, that government has nothing to do to help anybody. It can steal, it can go into debt, and it could profit its cronies and its corporations that supported it to be in power. A good government is concerned about inflation because inflation makes the cost of survival higher, which means it makes the people suffer more. Therefore, a good government would fight inflation. For example, a good government would get into the home business. A good government would get into the apartment business or the condo business to try to lower the costs of home, which is one of the biggest bondages on the planet to pay the rent and mortgage. No government gets into the construction business. The construction business is ruled by guilds and mobs of every kind. That's why homes are almost impossible to buy. It takes a 25-year mortgage for most people to buy a home. That's outrageous. If a Walmart type corporation or a Costco type corporation would get into home building, you could probably buy a home for 30 grand or 40 grand because they know that the more you buy or something, the more you make of something, the lower the costs. There are also robotics that can be used to build homes, which would lower the cost. But government doesn't look into this kind of stuff. The government doesn't look, it's more into foreign policy. It's worried about foreign policy. It's not worried about survival. That is bad government. Foreign policy is a way to hide from the domestic problems of the people. A good government faces the evils of the society. If there are corporations that are ripping off 95% of the people, like, say, the car industry or the pharmaceutical industry or the medical industry, the hospital industry, to name a few. There's so many thieves in the society blessed by the government because the government is sold to the corporations. The government is not sold to the people. The government is not offended if the people get ripped off. Well, a good government is offended, is so offended when the people get ripped off that it goes to war against those very corporations and maybe even takes them over and maybe even runs these corporations to bring to the people cheap products, cheap cars, cheap pharmaceuticals, cheap hospitals, and so forth. That's not the kind of government that we have anywhere on the planet. The forces of evil, the forces of thieving, the mobster forces in society that comes from corporations that just want to make more and more and more money are more in control of the government than the people are in control of the government, even though the people pay most of the money to run the government. It's a very, very different situation to face evil, which is destroying the citizens, and sleep with that same evil to make that evil more wealthy and more powerful, which is unfortunately the kind of government that we have. Most of the planet's government is very, very intimate with the corporations. They're sleeping with the corporations, okay? They're not sleeping with the people. The people are not their lovers, right? The people are peasants. The people are nothing. The people can struggle an entire life to just survive. The government is fine with it. That's the kind of attitude of the kings of the old kings and queens like Louis XIV and all these other British monarchies who used to, in the feudal age. We are in a model feudal age. The rich still dominate the poor. In order to be a politician, you have to be rich, you have to be a lawyer, you have to be a doctor, you have to be some kind of, but the wealthy don't understand 95% of the people. most people are poor or middle class poor, which means they're just struggling to get, the mortgage paid and the car paid and the children to go to school and so forth. They're just tight and having enough money to retire, and not being on the street. That's the majority of the people. And that's in the advanced countries, in the modern countries. In the third world countries, it's just a living hell. And the government is even worse. So in conclusion of this first clip on government, which I've studied for many years, is that a good government is sensitive to the people, to the majority of the people, to 95% of the people. And 95% of the people have a problem with survival, which means the government has to become an expert in survival and not allow survival to go up in price. I mean, if the price of rent, mortgage, food, gasoline, cars, fundamentals go up, the government is insulted and goes to war to bring down these prices. That's good government. We don't have that. The government not only doesn't go to war against this, it actually taxes this even more. The government makes money taxing gasoline, taxing cars, taxing homes, welcome taxes, all kinds of bullshit to make the price of survivor higher and higher and make life more and more impossible for the average person, preventing prosperity. That's the business of government. The government is, unfortunately, a burden to the people, not an asset to the people, which is it's supposed to be. A government has to become an asset to the people, a pride to the people. It has to bring tears of joy to the people because it's so good. That's not the government we have. We have bad government throughout the planet. A government that people don't even want to talk about government. They're just happy there's no war. That's the level of satisfaction that people expect of go. Well, as long as there's no war, we're fine with the government. That's outrageous. We need a government that is sold to the people, that looks after the people, the 95% of the people. We don't need a government that is sold to corporations, right? And bring the corporations more and more and more wealth. We need a completely different type of government. And communism is not the solution to the problem. And private enterprise is a fuel of life evolution. Capitalism is the way of life evolution. Communism is not.